How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Touche Football Podcast on YouTube. Colin, how are you doing?
It's been great. All I've eaten is Fruity Pebbles all day, but hopefully that'll change by the end of the day. Probably going to hit the field later today, but yesterday was really huge for me. I was able to go to the Chelsea Fulham game, and man, it was something special. Last week we attended the Arsenal and United game, and I thought to myself that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and this was no different. I was finally able to see my favorite club play live, and it was an amazing and enthralling experience, and certainly one I won't forget. I even got both goals on video, and especially the one where Ben Chilwell took the corner and eventually resulted in a goal. I was able to get the whole build up, the chant, and the celebration afterwards, and not to mention it was on FedEx Field, and being Commanders fans, to see
Yeah, for sure.
your favorite soccer team play on your favorite football teams in your favorite football team stadium and watch them win was something special. So something I certainly won't forget for a while.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, like, just going from like the fact that, I mean, at least, for me and then for you, like having not really witnessed, Premier League teams play and then getting 2 games in the span of a week or so that's pretty special stuff.
It was.
For me, a lot less spectacular. I was excited about this video today, so I went down to there's a place not too far from where I live called Small Cheval. So if there's any Chicago listeners in there, they may know what I'm talking about. But they've got these. I definitely was a kid today, and I went and I got myself a dipped cone with rainbow sprinkles, and that made me excited. It got me in the mood to do this episode. So I've got my rainbow sprinkles dipped cone, good to go. I'm set. I'm ready. I'm excited to jump into this. All right.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, before we jump into the video, which I'll get into in a sec, I just wanted to take just a few seconds and say thank you so much for all the support that we got from episode 1. Honestly, like when we set out on this whole thing, like we really kind of envisioned, a really slow start and kind of building into something bigger. And I didn't really expect us to hit, almost 100 subscribers in the first episode. And that just goes from, people liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, like anything that anybody did, it didn't go unnoticed. And I really appreciate all the feedback and support that we got from so many people. It was really honestly humbling and overwhelming. So I appreciate all the love and support, and I really hope that for those that are interested in the channel, maybe for following this and following us on our journey, I hope that if you're not really new to, or if you're not really familiar with the game or the leagues or how any of this works, that maybe this video can be beneficial for you. So I'm very excited to get into that. All right. So we've entitled this episode New to Football. And again, really the premise of everything is that if you don't watch this week in, week out, it's going to be a little bit different from sports that you see in the US. And we'll go through what some of those similarities and differences are. All right. So Colin already stated, we're Commanders fans. We watch NFL. We watch, NBA, or, I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan too. So, we watch American sports. And I think that if you're a fan of American sports, there's some similarities that are kind of ingrained in your head of what you're used to seeing like very frequently. And one of those is that a lot of these leagues, you'll have, probably anywhere from, 30, 32 teams or so. And they break them into 2 different conferences. You might have your East, West. And from there, you've got, your regional rivalries or divisions. And so you might have your, your Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees are both kind of like, Northeast teams that, have an intense rivalries because of the cities they play in, but they're also in the same division. And so they play each other very frequently. And because of that, that's where those rivalries come from. But one thing that is consistently the same in every American sport is that we have fixed teams. That means there's no teams getting kicked out of the league. And there's no teams that are, waiting in the wind per se to take their place. If you finish last place in the NBA or the NFL, odds are you're going to have a very good chance of getting a high draft pick the next season. You'll have a young, exciting player that can help you compete for the following year. But that's definitely a little different when we get to European soccer. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. Is that's going to be one thing about American sports that's distinctly different. So Colin, unless there's something that I'm missing, I'll let you kind of cover like a little bit about how the playoffs and how we determine champions in American sports and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, the playoffs add a completely different dimension to American sports, and it's quite fascinating. I think, though, as you mentioned, teams that are looking forward to just getting to the off season. These teams that don't perform well throughout the year, it's their chance to just sit around and play their bench and prepare for the off season. Whereas teams like the Warriors, the playoffs is where the season just begins, and
Hmm.
within the playoffs, there's a captivating and excitement around the fans, like across the league. There's so much energy surrounding that time, but it's just a few weeks out of the year, and I think with soccer in Europe, there's just so much energy surrounding every match week, from 1 to 38, and I think it's what makes it so special. As we've mentioned before, those teams that are doing poorly just can't switch off and look to the off season. There are games that they have to play and get results from to avoid those relegation spots. And so whether you're a Manchester City fighting to win the league, or you're a Everton desperately holding on to safety, there's something, or anywhere in the middle, there's something for every fan to get out of every week. So it's certainly an exciting experience as a fan.
Yeah. And I think that when we look at those teams, particularly the ones that don't perform well, and we see, sometimes their fans will check out, at the end of the season because those last four games, maybe they're eliminated. It doesn't matter. And they're already looking forward to the off season. They're already looking at free agency. They're looking at what players they can bring in to help improve the team. And we're going to really get into how that is vastly different when we look at European sports. So, shifting
Right.
our focus over to Europe, I really want to draw the comparison to one particular American sport, and that's going to be NCAA collegiate sports. So, when we look at the NCAA, you're going to have your SEC, you're going to have your Big Ten, you're going to have these different conferences, and you're going to have these regional teams that play within that conference. So you'll have in the SEC, your Southeastern Conference, you might have your Alabama, and everybody's kind of expecting that team to do really well and compete for a national championship. You'll also have a team like Vanderbilt, where they play in the same conference as Alabama, but probably aren't people's shortlist to win a national championship. No disrespect to Vanderbilt. So they go into the season with different goals and expectations of what they're hoping to achieve, even though they're playing in that same league. And then ultimately, those different conferences come together and they play either a March Madness tournament, or they're going to play, college football playoff, or whatever it is. They come together, and we've got, your Ohio State will play your Alabama, which will play, your Texas. And these are all coming from different conferences, and they play to determine who's the best in collegiate sports. The same thing is true in European sports, except for instead of having conferences, we're going to have leagues. And those leagues are not going to be regional, they're going to be specifically for those countries. So you might have La Liga in Spain, or the Premier League in England, or Serie A in Italy. So the overarching body that basically, determines, makes the rules, makes the schedules for all of these events is called UEFA, and that's the Union of European Football Association. The way that we determine how these leagues work is you're going to have, basically countries and their leagues, and how the teams in those leagues perform is going to determine the ranking of that country. The higher you're ranked, the more teams you get to participate in these big European tournaments like the Champions League or Europa League. And you can see that Italy and Germany, they just switched places. So last year, Italy was ranked third. This year, Germany's ranked third because their teams performed very well. Even though Italy did have some teams that performed very well, that wasn't consistently true across all their competitions. In fact, I believe an Italian team lost in every final last season. So we had, what's it, Inter Milan lost the Champions League. I know Fiorentina lost in the Conference League, and who was the Europa League?
Roma lost in the Roma.
Roma. Yeah, correct. Exactly, right? So, that doesn't bode well for those Italian teams, but they did make it very far, so you can see their coefficients are gonna be pretty close. And this fluctuates from year to year. The key takeaway for all of this is that when we look at like this year's Champions League, you're going to see England is ranked number 1. They have 4 teams competing. But Spain, you'll see they have 5. And the reason why they have 5 is because the last team listed, Sevilla, won the Europa League, which is a subsequent like second tier European competition, and earned eligibility for this year's Champions League. So the only countries that have 4 teams that are eligible for the Champions League are going to be England, Spain, Germany, and Italy. After that, it gets a little bit more murky, where teams are not necessarily guaranteed places, and other teams maybe that finish third in France or Portugal would have to play champions of other smaller countries with lower ranked coefficients. So, for example, we can see that Belgium, Switzerland, Greece, Norway, all these countries, and this is just some of dozens of countries that have teams competing or have teams that are champions from those different leagues compete in the Champions League as well. So this is going to be a very large tournament that, honestly, when we look at how it starts, has 73 teams that are competition eligible. But they whittle their way down, and there's games taking place tomorrow, right, to kind of whittle it down to 32 teams, which will play in a group stage. So we saw on the left-hand side of the screen, there are 24 teams that are already locked in, and then we're just waiting on those final 8 teams to get determined. It's a pretty simple setup. We're going to have a group. It's going to be, random draw to determine who plays in what group. They play each other. You obviously can't play yourself. So that's going to be 3 games at home, 3 games on the road, played over the course of the season. And 2 teams advance, 2 teams are eliminated. From there, it's pretty straightforward. We get into a knockout phase, quarterfinals, semifinals, and then we have a winner, right? So we're going to have teams play home and away in those ties. And who progresses is based on who scores the most goals in that competition. So even though a team might win a game 1-0, if the next game they lose 3-0, then that means that the other team's going to go forward 3-1 aggregate on goals, if that makes sense. All right. And then obviously that leads us to a Champions League final, which is essentially like the Super Bowl of European soccer. So this year we're going to have that game is played on a neutral site, and this year that's going to be London. So they play that final in Wembley Stadium in London.
Yeah, that provides incentives for those English teams to reach the final because, in essence, it gives them a home field advantage being in Wembley.
For sure. And we see that sometimes happen in American sports too, as I think if you look back at Tampa Bay, I think they finished in the Super Bowl, which was played in Tampa Bay, and they won that game. Mm-hmm. Even though that site had been predetermined to host the Super Bowl from the season's beginning, which maybe added extra motivation for the Buccaneers to do well. So the same thing is true in this scenario. All right, so shifting our focus kind of to away from Europe and then honing in on English Premier League, we have to understand a little bit about how the English Football League works. And, Colin, you've got some teams that when you've looked at, when you started watching the Premier League, it was probably a set of 20 teams. And I'm sure that looks vastly different from what it looks like now.
For sure.
When I started watching, I think we had, Blackburn Rovers was playing in the Premier League, and they haven't been back for a long time. And that means that team got relegated and they haven't made their way back. So those 20 teams are going to rotate and switch from year to year because we're going to have 3 teams that are relegated and then 3 teams promoted from the championship, which is the second division of English football. And this process, it kind of replicates itself in every league. So you've got teams getting promoted from League 2 to League 1, or in the case of anybody who may have followed Ryan Reynolds' documentary about Wrexham FC, you can see that they went from the National League to League 2. So they've been promoted back into the English Football League, as the National League, which is the red one at the bottom, is not considered part of the English Football League. Only those top 4 divisions are.
And yeah, I watched a video on this, and it said if you start a new team, it's like 19 years, I think, if you get promoted every year to make the Premier League, which is insane. It's just very hard for these teams to get promoted. I mean, obviously you see Wrexham, and there's a vision there, but I think for them, they just got to focus on hopefully, like, one, staying in the league at League Two, and secondly, if they're looking to push to make the Premier League, it's got to be one step at a time and make League One. It's 1 year at a time. So excited to see what they can
Right.
do.
And I mean, look at even there's a team playing in the Premier League this year, which has almost a Cinderella story. I know a lot of people love Cinderella stories. Luton Town FC, which they're going to be a Premier League team this year, 9 years ago was playing in the National League. And that's pretty much unheard of. It's the fastest any team has progressed through 5 divisions. Um, but then at the same time, on the flip side, you've got a team like Leicester City who finished as champions of the Premier League in 2015, and now they're playing in the Championship, no longer a Premier League team. So your fortunes can change very quickly. And that's something that is always interesting to watch year to year when we look at the Premier League. So switching and focusing just on that top division of the Premier League, as you can see, all these teams play in England, and we've got 20 teams that compete in this league. There's no playoffs. There's no championship game. Every game matters in this league. So from the very first game, which is played in August, to the very last game that's played in April and May, those games matter. And we'll get into a little bit about the point system and how that works to kind of accumulate points and determine where you finish in the league table. But as of right now, if we look at that league table, you're going to have your team that's going to finish number one, and they're going to be champions of England, crowned the best team in the country. After that, you're going to have teams that finish in the top four, and those 4 teams are going to be Champions League eligible. Like we said, England gets 4 places based on their country's coefficient. They're the number 1 ranked team in the world in Europe, so they're going to have all those spots available. And after that, you'll have teams that will finish in 5th and 6th in those Europa League spots or those Conference League spots in 7th, and those will be your European eligible teams. After that, everybody from 8th through 17th, they get to stay in the Premier League, and they get awarded more prize money based on where they finish in the league. So if you look at those last 3, 18th, 19th, and 20th, and Colin, I know you and I, when we were watching the league last year, those were some of the most enticing games at the end of the season, kind of watching who was going to stay up and who was going to get relegated to that lower division.
For sure. I remember, even this year, you said, we had City who had already clinched the league. And really, I mean, the focus really it turned to, because I mean, all the top 4 teams, I mean, it was mathematical chance, teams still had a chance, but it was pretty much locked in who those top 4 spots were going to be. And really, the focus really did shift to those last 3 teams and who's going to stay up and who's going to go down, between Leicester, Leeds, and Everton. And obviously, Everton was able to pull that out. But we saw throughout the course of the day how the league shifted. One goal made all the difference, and it was just it was heartbreaking for some of those fans. But as a neutral, it was very captivating to see, for sure.
Yeah, and there's no like letting your foot off the gas. It's not like we said, American sports. Your team is crap and they don't do well, you can kind of kick back and just relax. And it's not going to be we'll wait till next year. Well, when you support a team that's not doing well and maybe they're in 20th position, like I think Southampton was this year. I mean, for them, like they're just hoping and praying that they can turn those fortunes around so they can stay in the league. Otherwise, it can be a long and painful road. And once you get kicked out of the Premier League, I mean, you don't have the viewership, you don't have the TV revenue, you don't have the money anymore. You can't bring in the big players. It becomes very hard to compete with those big teams. And so we can see it's very painful for some of these fan bases. And sometimes it's not an easy road back. Sometimes teams bounce right back up, and sometimes they go decades. And it really just depends. One thing that is consistent, though, and I think that there's no coincidence that we've got those 7 European places, but we're going to get into what we call the Premier League Big Six. Now, this season on this channel, we're going to cover every team in the Premier League, and it's going to be everybody from 1 to 20th. And next week, you'll see we'll give our predictions on where we think everybody's going to finish from last place all the way to who's going to be champion. But one thing that's consistent is that these Big Six teams are consistently the best teams with the largest fan bases, with the most money, with the most following, and the most success in the league. So even though a team like Bournemouth or Burnley has every bit of chance to be champions, odds are these one of these six teams consistently comes in as a champion, and that's been true over the last, you know, 2 decades, right? So even longer in some cases. So one thing that's true is that, Colin, you said you're a Chelsea fan. Chelsea plays in
Mhm.
London, and they share that city with a lot of teams, as we could see on the map before. But of those big six, there's two really big teams that play in London, and those are going to be Arsenal and Tottenham, two North London teams that have an intense rivalry with each other. After
Mhm.
that, you've got Manchester United, Manchester City, and Liverpool, which are, the three other that play in Northern England in the cities of Liverpool and Manchester, respectively. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look and deep dive into who are these teams, what have they done historically, and what's their reputation, and maybe draw some comparisons between American teams, from different sports that maybe we're familiar with watching, and we can understand kind of like what the correlations and parallels are between these teams. So Colin, you'll take those London teams since you're a Chelsea fan, and I'll cover those Northern England teams. So we'll start with Arsenal.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I'll start from the bottom. I think that Arsenal has always been a team that for me has been kind of like a huge rival. I mean, when you go on and play FIFA, the soccer video game, it's like, you're playing and you say Chelsea's your favorite team, you put that you save that, and automatically it pops up that Arsenal is your rival. So covering this is a little bit weird, but this is a team that I do respect a lot, and they have a very decorated and gloried past. I said that the comparison for me was the Miami Dolphins, because they also have a very a special and rich past. They are both teams that within their league have gone undefeated, with the 1972 Dolphins and the 0304 Arsenal team. They both have gone through a bit of a drought in the last decade or so, but both teams had really good seasons last year. I mean, look at Miami; they
Mm-hmm.
made the playoffs, and really, I mean, if we're being honest, they could have pulled out a win against the Bills, even as the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
And for Arsenal, they had a great year. I mean, they're at top of the year, top of the league for 93% of the season, and unfortunately for them, they bottled it in the end. But still, second is a lot better than they had been doing in the recent past. I believe they broke the record last season for being in the top of the league for the most amount of time and then still not winning, which
Yeah, not a good record
is
to have for sure. Yeah.
it's an embarrassing stat. It doesn't offer much condolences to the Arsenal fans that are still mourning the last few games of the season, but it shows how much better, they've gotten. They have 13 league championships. Really it should be 14, as we all know. The big
Mm-hmm.
knock on Arsenal, though, aside from bottling the league last year, is that aside from all their domestic success, they struggle to win on the European stage. With Arteta, they've become a much more respected team. Certainly one that I think they'll be feared in Europe this year, and certainly domestically in the Premier League. So, excited to see how it'll all turn out. But yeah. I mean, they've certainly come a long way from where they were, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And you could probably say the same about the Miami Dolphins, but excited to
Yeah, I
see
like
what
to
they'll be
call
next
Arsenal
year.
Banter FC. I do. We have a special relationship, us United fans and Arsenal fans. But to your point, like, yeah, I mean, if you go back to those mid 2000s, I think those Arsenal teams were arguably some of the best in Premier League history, with some of the best players in Premier League history. And I remember when United was able to kind of end that undefeated run, and it took 2 years to do, right. So definitely a team that's been one of the best, and I think in most circles is widely considered the third most successful team in England. It's just that European, uh, title has eluded them. They've never been UEFA Champions League winners. So,
Mhm.
and they have a team right down the road from them that they absolutely despise. So I'll let you hop into that.
So my comparison for Tottenham is the Detroit Lions, and that might sound a little bit harsh, but I think
Mm.
they both have a super rich history. But the big knock on both of them is with Tottenham, they've never won the Premier League, and the Lions have never won the Super Bowl. Both teams have had great players. However, even with these world class players, their invested have not their investments have not manifested themselves in results and in trophies. I mean, the last time Tottenham won a trophy was, I think it was 2008 with the League Cup. So, trophies have been kind of hard to come by for the Spurs. However, it isn't all bad. They're trying to settle on new ownership recently, and the club offers a ton from a business perspective. They have a new stadium, a great fan base, and as a bonus, they have a huge monetary asset in Hwang-Min Son. I think you experienced it firsthand. Being in Korea and seeing
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
how much all those Koreans adore him, and he's like the idol and their hero. You go to the game and there's thousands of Koreans there, in Son jerseys, for sure.
Yeah, I would say one player has really, made such an impact that, is widely considered, one of, if not the most popular team in Korea, simply just because of one star player they have from that country. So, but to your point, and on that Detroit Lions comparison, I think that if you look at players like Barry Sanders or Calvin Johnson that were some of the best at their positions, that did manifest itself into winning championships. And the same thing has been true of
Mhm.
Tottenham. If they've had Gareth Bale, they've had Luka Modric, they've had Harry Kane, some of the best players at their positions, and hasn't resulted in bringing in any silverware for them. So they've got a new manager, and I think that we'll have to see. It's he did well at Celtic, and I think we'll have to see what he does with this team. It'd be interesting to see too if Harry Kane's still playing there next season.
For sure.
All right. I think you should probably be pretty familiar with the next team we're going to cover, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Chelsea's my team for as long as I've been a fan of this game, and last season was not a year to remember. It's very similar in
Yeah, they
my
were straight
opinion
up poo
to.
poo. They were terrible. They were awful.
I'd say last season was a pretty close to that one year where I think it's the 15-16 season um where I think we finished 10th that year, and this year we finished 12th. So, not seasons to remember, but I'm loyal, so uh, I'm there. I'm a fan through and through. I mean, I'm a Commanders fan as well, so uh,
Just used to riding
I'd
the
say
lows, huh?
yes. I think though that a lot of people have said with the arrival of Mauricio Pochettino, going back to Tottenham, he was their former coach, and I think that a lot of people have said, oh, this is a bad move for Chelsea, and we're not going to win anything under him. But for in my opinion, I think he's very he brings the best out of his players. I mean, I remember a couple years ago when he transformed that Tottenham team into a Champions League contender, and they played Liverpool in the final. And obviously it didn't go their way,
It's a
but
great
just
point. Yeah, it's a great point.
making it that far has is an accomplishment in and of itself. And while they weren't able to pull it out, I think that he does bring the best in his players, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year. We've won, I think, 5 major trophies in the last 20, 25 years, and it's exciting. I think that while we've hit kind of a brick wall in terms of in winning ever since that Champions League triumph in 2021, I think we have a lot of potential, and that's why I compared us to the San Antonio Spurs. I think that they're a team that they've won a lot in the last 2 decades, 2.5 decades
Hmm.
or so, and recently though they've kind of hit a brick wall in terms of their performances, in terms of their results. But I think though both teams have an exciting future, an exciting potential to see. Especially at Chelsea, they got a ton of young players, and I mean, we saw that this season in preseason. They looked great. Scoring with a lot of their younger players, a lot of their new signings. Excited to see where they can go. They were able to win the Premier League Series Cup. I don't know if that doesn't count as a major trophy. I wish it did, but
Yeah, they almost looked like they
it
were like embarrassed to lift that up. I saw the videos.
yeah,
It's
it
like
wasn't that special. It wasn't that
I
special,
don't think it
but
was Reece James's biggest trophy he's ever won.
yeah, they were that enthusiastic for sure. At the end of the day, like I said, tons of potential in this team, and I'd be very surprised if we were if we were anything close to what we were last season.
Yeah, I think the key thing with Chelsea is the fact that they do have the financial means to be successful, and they've proven that. I think they've spent 600 million pounds in the last year or so,
Yeah,
just because I mean they're under new ownership, which is American investment in Todd Bowley, and I think that he's demonstrated that he's not willing to splash the cash to try to be successful. So eventually, if you can get the right manager and make those players that they've invested in work, then they could be a very scary team. And I, as much as it was a little bit fun to watch them just flounder and fail last season, I don't really anticipate that that's going to be the same story this year. And I would kind of highly expect that they're competing for those top 4 places in Champions League, if not even higher aspirations this season.
right. And yeah, as you said, the money that Todd Bowley has spent hasn't really demonstrated its true value in the results that they've produced. But at the same time, I think it's exciting to see his willingness to spend, and that's not the case in all ownership for sure. So excited to see where they can go. Like you said, I hope that we have higher aspirations than 12th. Um,
Yep.
but shifting
All
to
right.
the Manchester team, so that's all you.
Enough talking about Chelsea. We're done. We're done. We've covered them. We've beat it like a dead horse. All right, time to get on to bigger and better things. All right, so
Wow.
Manchester United. I am a diehard Manchester United fan. I watch every game in week out. I would say, and I'll get into some of the accolades, but I kind of looked and I struggled a little bit with what I wanted to do as far as a U.S. team comparison. Ended up going with the Yankees. And part of the reason why I did was I think when you look at some of the things that they have in common, if you don't watch sports and you walk down, the street, you'll see people wearing Yankees hats. They probably couldn't name a single player on the team, but they recognize that it's a brand, right? And you'll see the same thing in other parts of the world too. You'll see people that they don't follow baseball, couldn't tell you a single pitch stat, nothing that has to do with that team, but they'll wear that hat because it's a brand. And they've built that legacy over generations of success. And I think that they kind of can share that with Manchester United. If you look at Forbes' most valuable franchises or brands, you're always going to see the Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, Manchester United. They're always kind of in that top tier of teams that have those recognizable brands that almost transcend the sport, and something much larger than just the team itself. If a player gets signed to that team, it instantly propels them to superstar status. And whether or not they like it or not, I mean, it's they're going to be in the spotlight. And that's the same thing that I've seen, and some people, they thrive in that environment and some people fail. And we see that happen with the Yankees. Unfortunately, one of the things that we also have in common with the Yankees is that they haven't really done that much for the last 10 years. It's like they've kind of been riding the coattails of previous success. And it's I think the last World Series the Yankees won was in 2009. And I think the last time we won a league title was in 2013. And even that team was kind of aging and kind of getting over the line. They were able to squeeze by. But if you compare their point totals with other Premier League winning teams, most of the time they would finish second or third. So maybe it was a down year for the league. But honestly, the last time I remember United being really successful was kind of that, late 2000, early 2010 period, and they think they played in a couple Champions League finals against Barcelona. They lost both. But one thing that I will say that they do have, over any other team is that they have won more league championships than any other team in the sport. Another comparison you could give to the Yankees, who have won more World Series than any other team in their sport. So when we look at domestic success and off the field success, I think that you got to say Manchester United are in the conversation for the biggest team in England. And they've demonstrated that over decades of success, going back to, the late 80s, early 90s. And I think that Premier League era, which began in the early 90s, has been just a stretch of dominance under a manager in Alex Ferguson, the likes of which we haven't seen replicated, at least up until this point. I mean, we've got teams like City that are on a very successful run, but not for that duration of time. And yeah, I mean, I've been a fan my whole life. I am a big believer that Eric Ten Hag, the manager that we have now, is the right man for the job. But they've invested a lot of money in getting him the players he wants, so it's up to him to deliver. I think a team that maybe I wouldn't say overachieved, but exceeded expectations last season to finish third. And I think going into this season, you've got to hope that they've got their goals set higher than just competing for the top four. I think that with the amount of money they've spent, it's time to start talking about them as competing for titles.
For sure, for sure. I mean, we saw that in New York, and with how much they've come along. As you've said, the last 10 years have not been the prettiest, but there's a lot that they've spent, a lot of new signings that have come in. We've talked about Rasmus Højlund before, and that's exciting for you guys to bring him in. We'll see what he can do. There's a lot of pressure, as you said. Playing for that club. It's a big deal, big honor. So we'll see how he handles it.
Yep. As much as the next two teams we're going to cover are not going to be my favorite. I'm not going to be shy about the fact that I don't like them. They're not my teams, but I do respect them, right? So pivoting to Liverpool, I would say that even though I said we've won 20 league titles as a United fan, it doesn't take too much to realize that we're not out in front of the pack by that much. If we look at Liverpool, they won 19 league titles, just one less than us, and they were 1 point away from making it 20 just 2 years ago. So if we look at kind of those lack of success that United has had the last couple of years, that's not been the case of Liverpool. They've been a very successful team over the last couple of years, with last season being a little bit of an outlier in the fact that they didn't finish in the top four and they won't be playing Champions League football this year. I highly suspect that they're going to be right back in the mix for the best teams in England this season. And I think that when you've got a manager like Jurgen Klopp, that would be your expectation. We've seen a pretty large exodus of players leaving to Saudi Arabia. I mean, Jordan Henderson, they've got, think some of their former managers, some of their former players, even players that were key parts of Liverpool, like Sadio Mane. They've left and they've all kind of gone to Saudi Arabia. So it's kind of been this changing of the guard per se in Liverpool. And we've seen them kind of bring some players in. We'll see players like McAllister and really important pieces that are going to be replaced. And we see Virgil van Dijk. I saw today, he will be the new captain of Liverpool. So it's going to be a little bit of a change of the guard, but I think they've got the same manager that achieved remarkable success. We see in the bottom corner of the graphic that they won a Champions League just a few years ago. They won a league just a few years ago. And I think that when we look at that U.S. team comparison of like the Boston Celtics, they have one of, if not, in my opinion, the best home field of any team in the league. Anfield is an absolutely terrifying place to play. And under the right circumstances, it can rival even the best and most hostile environments in Europe. And I think that has a lot of influence on teams, and I highly suspect that they'll be in the mix again this season. One thing they do have to their name that they can boast over anybody else is they've won twice as many European championships as an English club. I think United is the second most, and we've only won 3. They've won 6, and they won 1 just recently in, I believe, was it 2019? So as much as we, kind of want to take away, as a United fan, we always, we'll go back and forth. If you look at the Celtics, they have a true home court advantage, one of the best places in the NBA to play. They've also kind of are always in that conversation between them and the Lakers on who's the greatest team in their respective sport. And I think that you can obviously make the argument on why you think the Celtics are the best team in the sport. Some people will say the Lakers, and they each kind of achieved success at maybe some different times. And there was some periods of time where they, went toe to toe with each other, for sure. And I think that if you look at the Celtics, you would say that team has always been in the mix, especially in the last 5 years, in competing for titles. And I think that that's the game. That's the goal and aim for a team like Liverpool.
Moving to Manchester City.
Gross.
Not our favorite team for sure.
Yeah, I would say for Manchester City, it's a tricky one. I think you've got to respect the success that they've had. They are coming off arguably one of, if not the greatest season of an English team in history. They win what was called what's referred to as the treble, which is essentially when you win a European championship, you won a Premier League championship, and you win an FA Cup. You've won all three, all of them in the same season. And at the same time, they also won their third championship in a row, their third Premier League in a row. So they have absolutely dominated English sport, the English game over the last few seasons. And I think that you can point no further than Pep Guardiola, their manager. I think that it's not debatable that he's the greatest manager that's actively coaching today. And I think that they have the best manager. They have some of the best players, probably the best striker in the world in Erling Haaland, who so we picture holding the trophy on the far right. And it's going to be hard to dethrone them. And I think that's got to be the primary focus of a lot of English teams. They're currently the best, but I have that team comparison of them as being the Houston Astros. It's a team that's got a little bit of an asterisk, and it's got a lot of controversies surrounding their success. And we can argue about, the level of play that they demonstrate on the field is unmatched. They're the best at what they do, and I don't think you can discredit Guardiola or the players for that. What a lot of fans will point to is the fact that this is a team that maybe 15 years ago was losing 8-1 to Middlesbrough, right? This was not a dominant team, even though they have a long history. You can see they were founded in the late 1800s. This team had not won a lot of league titles. They had not been a force in England, but they were bought by Middle East investment from United Arab Emirates and from Abu Dhabi. And once they got that key to kind of unlock that financial success, they invested a lot of money, and the team has performed better than any other team around them. And it's hard to turn a blind eye to the fact that a lot of the success that they've achieved, in some cases, a lot of fans will point to the fact they think that that's been bought success versus ones that have kind of been built through the blood, sweat, and tears of decades of establishing that brand and legacy that other teams like Liverpool, Manchester United, or Arsenal have done so. And so it's hard to put them in that same category. But again, I think that until a team goes out and dethrones Manchester City, I think that they're going to be the team to beat.
For sure. I think that, as you've said, there's nothing you could take away from these players. They're world class, and they've got a world class coach that's achieved a lot. As you said, I don't think that you can't take it away, but there's always that you said asterisk but behind their success, and I think that for other teams, even the one we're about to cover next, I think that it maybe isn't the best model in terms of winning, and it's a little bit sad in some ways, but I think that for a team like Manchester City, they're they've been successful for around 10 years now. So, maybe in 20 years or so, maybe they're a team that that has gone through a lot of work and investment to sustain long-lived success that we see in these other teams, like the ones we've mentioned, and like the other big six clubs. Maybe not Tottenham, but the other big six clubs that we mentioned. Maybe they're among those that have accomplished success, long-lived for sure.
So following that blueprint of what we just talked about with Middle Eastern investment, I think that it's important. I know we talked about a big six, but it might be time that we start referring to it as a big seven, as we've seen the arrival of Newcastle United as a team that last season finished in fourth place. I think a lot higher than a lot of people expected. But I think a lot of people, and most people, would say that they are on the trajectory of a Manchester City, because within the last 2 years, they were purchased by Saudi Arabia and now are undeniably the richest club in the land, with the largest financial capital at their disposal. That's not taking away the fact that they achieved fourth place without world-class players last year under a manager who surprised a lot of people in Eddie Howe. And I think that his appointment propelled the team, and they are on a momentum swing, which will be very interesting to see how they perform over the last few years. This isn't to take away any of the history that Newcastle have. They are a great team that has been, I remember at the very late 90s, Newcastle was absolutely competing for titles with United, and in some cases they really kind of choked away some opportunities to beat us to winning some titles. So this is a team that was successful prior to that financial investment, but I think it's undeniable that that financial investment from Saudi Arabia is going to propel them to heights of which they likely have not achieved as a club previously.
Definitely. It's exciting. I mean, I as you said, they're a team that's kind of come out of nowhere, and I think that I'm excited as a neutral fan, to see how they'll fare in the Champions League next season. I think it's the first time they've been there in over 20 years. So I'm really excited. Chelsea's not going to be there, so just watching it from a neutral perspective, I'll be really excited to see how they do.
Yeah, and I think that team comparison that we have of the Eagles is an applicable one, and it's because they do have a great fan base. And when you go to St. James's Park, it's a great environment to play. Last season, the Eagles were a team that not a lot of people had playing in a Super Bowl, but they, under a newly appointed head coach, kind of took that team and rode success with great players all the way to, one a few snaps away from winning a championship. And I don't think people had Newcastle as a Champions League quality team last year, but they defied the odds and they got there bigger than with other teams that most people would have had in their preseason rankings finishing behind them. So, they've got the wind at their back, and I think that Newcastle's not going anywhere anytime soon. Like that's why I said I think it might be time where we kind of refer to this as a big seven, as they kind of assert their new era of success on the league. All right, I think we've covered these teams in depth, and there's more teams, and if anyone wants us to cover more teams than just this, we'll be more than willing to do so in the future. But I think these are the teams that are likely going to be making the most noise next season. So if you take us up on this offer and you decide, okay, I'll give this Premier League thing a chance, or I'll give Champions League a chance, or maybe you want to watch the Liga, or you want to watch another league, Italian league, whatever it is, you got to understand a little bit about how the leagues work. So if we kind of pivot back to that slide that we showed with the league table, at the end of the season, these points are going to get tallied up based on how teams perform. Again, there's no playoffs, so how you perform at the beginning of the season is going to be as equally as important as how you perform at the end. So we take those 20 teams, you play 19 opponents, and you play them home and away. So you're going to have 19 games at home, 19 games on the road, 38 games total. And if you win, you get 3 points. If you draw, both teams get a point. And if you lose, you get no points. For a team like Liverpool or Manchester City, getting a draw might feel like a loss against a team like Bournemouth or Burnley, where that draw may feel like a win going against a larger opponent. So not every point or draw is considered equal, even though points-wise it is, right? So some teams will have aspirations to win the league, and if you're a team like Manchester City, that may require 90, 95, almost 100 points to win the league. So you got to win as many of these games as you possibly can. If you're trying to stay above relegation, you're trying to hit about 40 points. If you can get 40 points, which means you got to win about a point every game, that comes out to about a point a game. So teams are going to have different goals and aspirations, and it's very interesting to see, how they compete over the course of the season. But this is basically the blueprint on these point systems and how it works and how this all gets tallied into who's a champion and who's playing in Europe next season.
Would have been hard to be a Liverpool fan last year, or not last year, but a couple years ago when they had 99 points and didn't win the league.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. And as somebody who's not even come close to 90 points, I can't even imagine getting there and coming with nothing. That would have been horrible. Horrible. All right. I want to draw our last attention to, if you're going to watch a game, just a little bit about how it works. I want to draw a special attention to the fabulous, handsome ref that we have in the bottom left of the screen there. Colin, you've done officiating. You do it on the side, so uh, you got a lot more experience with this than me. So why don't you take the rules of the game and break it down for our listening audience?
So I mean, yeah, I think that refing is something. The rules of the game are something that they do change the outcomes a lot of times. Whether it be a penalty kick or a yellow card, red card. These things do play a big part in the game, and I think that for going to uh, for penalty kicks, that is a huge momentum shifter, one way or the other. I think if you had to compare them, I think that it would be like a pass interference in the NFL. One way is one pass interference call can change the outcome of a game.
Hmm.
One moment you're on your own side of the field, the next moment you're in the red zone, and so I think that those calls are huge, and I think that uh, these calls and these rules of the game are really what sets this game apart from all the other ones for sure.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at those, the disciplinary fouls is, it's just important to understand that, a lot of times a player might get a yellow card. If they get a second yellow card, then that's going to lead to an automatic dismissal or a red card. And red cards are very rare. You might have teams go an entire season not get a red card. But
I've never given one.
yeah, I
They're
mean, and
they're
that's
rare. They're
good
hard to
because,
come by.
yeah,
I
I mean,
hope I
because
don't have to give one. They're not. They probably wouldn't be very fun to give away. So
no, because oftentimes, a red card is kind of given out with, maybe if you're endangering the safety of another opponent, which is something that nobody wants to see. So yeah, like hopefully, those are few and far between. But either way, just to understand the clock a little bit before we wrap it up, I know in American sports we're really used to seeing clocks kind of count down. You'll have your four quarters, and it'll be a 15-minute quarter, and it'll start counting down to zero. It's going to be the other way around when we watch football, and that's going to be basically a 90-minute game broken into two halves. It starts at zero and it works its way up to 45. Anytime the ball goes out of bounds, maybe there's a player injury, maybe there's a goal celebration. Anytime there's a stoppage of play, we're going to add that time, or the referee's going to add that time to the end of the game, or the end of the half. Sorry. So at the end of the first half, any stoppages will be added to the end of that first 45 minutes. They'll go into halftime. They'll come back. The clock will start at 45, and they'll play the next 45 minutes. And then at the end of that 45 minutes, we'll have 90 minutes played. Any stoppages that took place over the course of that second half are added then to that 90 minutes. So a lot of times in the corner, you'll see 90 minutes plus 5 or 90 minutes plus 6, right? And you'll see the stoppage added to the end of the game. And it's at the ref's discretion as to when the end of the game takes place. Colin, do you ever have any issues with the stoppages, or adding any stoppages to the end of the games? Like, I know a lot of
yeah,
times it's debatable, right?
yeah, I mean, then and you always have to be aware. A lot of times the games I ref, obviously I'm not refing professional, so you have to keep track of that yourself. You don't really have a fourth official to really help you out with that. So you really have to
Hmm.
be tracking. When the ball goes out of play. How long has this injury been going on? You want to check to see if they're okay, but at the same time you're also looking at your watch. Hey, how long has this been going on? So I've had a few games where it's like, the coaches are yelling at me like, "Hey, when's this game gonna end?" And you're like, "Okay, well, we got another minute to go," and they're trying to get a result or get over the finish line, and a lot of times those stoppage minutes are huge because teams a lot of times that you hit that 90-minute mark or that 45-minute mark, and it's like, okay, we've reached halftime or we've reached the end of the game. Teams players individually can start to switch off, and so as a player myself, it's hard not to sometimes once you hit that mark where it's like, okay, now it's time to switch off. So stoppage time is those final extra minutes that are added on can be game changing.
Is it fun? I know sometimes refs look like they're having too much fun, and
Yeah,
I don't think.
sometimes those games, if you ref, those night games that are super super close, sometimes you don't really want them to end. They're so intense, but they have to come to an end at some point. But yeah, no, for sure, it can be fun at times, and you just don't really want to end the game.
Speaking of having fun and not wanting it to end, I think this is where we're going to have to end this video. So if you've stuck around for almost an hour, I appreciate you guys taking the time to follow us through this. Hopefully it's been a little educational if you're new to the game, or it's something that maybe you're getting used to. So I think it's been one that I know we enjoyed putting it together, and I look forward to the next episode, particular as Colin and I are going to share kind of our thoughts on who we think is going to finish in what position in the Premier League, and I know I've got my thoughts on who's going to finish last, who's going to be champions, who's going to be top four. So look for that in the next episode. Colin, what do you have going on this week?
A lot of running, and our preseason for my college soccer team starts in just under 3 weeks. So pretty excited, going in as a freshman. So we'll see how it goes. Our coach put a goal out for us to get a 5 minute and 15-second mile, and that wasn't very exciting, but I'm working at
No,
it,
absolutely not.
trying every day to get better, and also getting a lot of touches in. I already did my workout, or going to after this, so excited for what's to come for sure. And
Well, if
also
you're a
got to
runner
get
and you got no, go ahead.
also got
Yeah,
to get that Sunday NFL ticket. Going in as a college student, as a Commander fan. I'm going to college in Pennsylvania, so
a pretty
I got to
penny right
figure out
there.
a way to watch the Commanders.
Yeah, get a VPN or something. Yeah, and if you're a runner and you got tips on how Colin can get a 5 minute mile, then drop those in the comments, because I'm sure he needs as
Please.
much help as he can get. Um, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Like the video, it does a lot to help us out with the YouTube algorithm. We've had so much support from the first video, and we really want to ride that momentum. So if you like what you see, let us know any sort of suggestions. We've seen all those in the comments below, so I appreciate all the love and support you guys have given us. It's been a lot of fun. I can't wait to see you guys next week. And if you made it to the end of this video, I owe you I owe you something. What do I owe you? $1? I owe you a soda. Also owe you a soda. All right, we owe you a soda. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, we owe you a soda. All right, so if you come across us, that's something I owe you. All right, hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you in the next video.